The auditorium fell silent as the university president handed me the microphone. Behind me, a massive banner read the Oliver Chin Memorial Center for Pediatric Cardiology. In the front row, my parents sat frozen, their faces pale as the reality of what was about to happen sank in. My mother's hands trembled in her lap. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching from where I stood. I took a breath and looked out at the 300 people gathered, doctors, donors, press, faculty, and the family members who'd actually mattered. My best friend Rachel sat beside my husband Marcus, both of them holding my 7-year-old daughter Lily. And there, in a small silver urn on a podium draped in blue velvet, were the ashes of the child this building was named after. My son. Their grandson. The boy they'd let die. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Before we dedicate this building, I need to tell you a story. A story about choices, priorities, and what happens when a family decides that appearances matter more than life itself." My mother made a small sound, a whimper, maybe, or a plea. I didn't look at her. I'd spent 4 years preparing for this moment, and nothing would stop me now. But let me take you back. Back to where this really began. Back to when I still believed that family meant something. My name is Mira Chen, and I'm 33 years old. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, in a picture-perfect house with picture-perfect parents who cared deeply about one thing: how everything looked to the outside world. My father, Robert Chen, was a successful commercial real estate developer. My mother, Linda, was a socialite who sat on charity boards and organized fundraisers where rich people paid thousands of dollars to feel good about themselves. I have one younger sister, Natalie. From the moment she was born when I was 4 years old, the family dynamic was set in stone. Natalie was the princess, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I was the responsible one, the one expected to excel without praise, to achieve without acknowledgement, to exist without taking up too much space. Growing up, I learned to be invisible. When Natalie threw tantrums, my parents coddled her. When I expressed any emotion, I was being dramatic or attention-seeking. When Natalie got a B, my parents celebrated. When I got straight A's, it was expected. When Natalie made the junior varsity cheerleading team, we had a party. When I was accepted into the National Honor Society, my father said, "That's nice, honey," without looking up from his phone. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that hard work would eventually earn their love. I told myself that if I just achieved enough, accomplished enough, became enough, they would finally see me. I was wrong. I met Marcus when I was 24, during my first year of medical school at the University of Washington. He was a third-year resident in emergency medicine, exhausted and brilliant and kind in ways I didn't know men could be. He saw me, really saw me, in a way my family never had. We fell in love slowly, carefully, like two people who'd both learned not to trust easily. We got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse when I was in my second year of med school. My parents were disappointed that we didn't have a real wedding, but they didn't offer to help pay for one either, so the courthouse it was. Rachel and Marcus's brother were our witnesses. We had dinner at our favorite sushi restaurant afterward and went home to our tiny apartment happy. My parents sent a card. Natalie didn't acknowledge it at all. I graduated from medical school with honors and began my residency in pediatric cardiology. The hours were brutal, the work was grueling, but I loved it. I loved the puzzle of the human heart, loved that my work would save children's lives. Marcus and I talked about having kids someday, but we were both so busy, so focused on our careers, that someday kept getting pushed back. Then, 3 years into my residency, I got pregnant. Oliver was born on a rainy Tuesday in March. He was perfect, 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire maternity ward. Marcus cried when he held him. I cried. We were exhausted and terrified and so completely in love it hurt. My parents visited the hospital once. They stayed 20 minutes, took a few photos for social media, and left because my mother had a luncheon. Natalie didn't come at all. She was too busy planning her engagement party. Yes, engagement party. Natalie had gotten engaged to Brandon, a wealth management consultant whose primary personality trait was having gone to Stanford. The engagement party was scheduled for 3 weeks after Oliver was born, and it was all my mother could talk about during that 20-minute hospital visit. "We've rented the ballroom at the Fairmont," my mother said, barely glancing at her newborn grandson. 250 guests. The caterer is the same one who did the governor's daughter's wedding. "Oh, Mira, it's going to be spectacular." I held my hours-old son and tried to muster enthusiasm. "That sounds lovely, Mom. You'll come, of course. And bring the baby. Everyone will want to see him." Everyone wanted to see my 3-week-old infant as a prop at my sister's party. Not because they cared about Oliver, but because he was a cute accessory. I didn't go. Oliver was too young, I was too exhausted, and honestly, I couldn't face watching my parents celebrate Natalie while barely acknowledging my son's existence. They were angry about it. My mother called it unsupportive. My father said I was being selfish. The engagement party cost $47,000. I know because my mother mentioned it casually during a phone call, her voice full of pride. $47,000 for a single party. I was making $58,000 a year as a resident, working 80-hour weeks, and still paying off medical school debt. $47,000 was nearly my entire annual salary. But that was just the beginning. Oliver was 6 weeks old when we noticed something was wrong. He was breathing too fast, getting tired during feedings, not gaining weight the way he should. I knew the signs. I was training to be a pediatric cardiologist, but I didn't want to believe him. Not my baby. Not Oliver. The echocardiogram confirmed what I'd feared. Oliver had a complex congenital heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot with pulmonary atresia. His heart had 4 separate problems, and without surgery, he wouldn't survive past infancy. Marcus held my hand while the pediatric cardiologist, my colleague, my friend, explained the treatment plan. Oliver would need his first open-heart surgery within the next month. He'd need at least 2 more surgeries as he grew. The prognosis with treatment was good. 70 to 80% of children with this condition lived to adulthood. Without treatment, he'd die within months. "The good news is you have insurance," Dr. Patricia Lynn said gently. She'd been my mentor throughout my residency. "Your hospital coverage is excellent. You'll have some out-of-pocket costs, but the majority will be covered." Those out-of-pocket costs turned out to be substantial. Our insurance had a deductible of $6,000 and an out-of-pocket maximum of $15,000 per year. Oliver would need care spanning multiple years. Between surgeries, hospitalizations, medications, therapies, and specialist visits, we were looking at $45,000 to $60,000 over the next 3 years. We had $8,000 in savings. Marcus and I sat at our kitchen table that night after Oliver was asleep, staring at spreadsheets and medical bills and trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. We could take out loans, but we were already drowning in my medical school debt. We could ask family for help. "My parents might be able to loan us something," Marcus said. His family wasn't wealthy, but they were comfortable and had always been supportive. "Maybe 10 or 15,000. "That would help," I said. Then I looked at him, hating what I was about to say. I should ask my parents. Marcus's expression darkened. He'd never liked how my family treated me, but he'd stayed quiet because he knew I kept hoping they'd change. "Mira, they have money," I said. "A lot of it. And Oliver is their grandson. They'll want to help." The look on Marcus's face told me he doubted that, but he squeezed my hand. Okay. Ask them. I called my mother the next day and explained everything. The diagnosis, the surgeries, the costs. I kept my voice steady, professional even, as if I were presenting a case study rather than begging for my son's life. So we're asking family if anyone can help with the medical costs, I said. Even a loan would be incredible. We'd pay it back with interest, whatever you want. But Oliver needs this surgery soon, and, Mira, honey, you know we'd love to help, my mother interrupted, her tone suggesting the opposite was true. But we've just committed a significant amount of money to Natalie's wedding. Your father and I have been very clear with her that she can have her dream wedding, and we can't go back on that promise. I stared at the wall of our apartment, my sleeping son in a bassinet beside me, and tried to process what I was hearing. Mom, this is Oliver's life. He'll die without this surgery. Don't be dramatic. You said the prognosis is good. He'll be fine. He'll be fine if we can afford the treatment. You're both doctors, my mother said, her voice taking on that edge that meant she was done with the conversation. Well, Marcus is, and you will be soon. You have good insurance. Surely you can work out payment plans or something. We simply can't liquidate investments right now. We have commitments. Commitments. Natalie's wedding was a commitment. Oliver's life was, what? An inconvenience? How much are you spending on the wedding? I asked quietly. Silence. Then, I don't see how that's relevant. How much, Mom? Your father and I have decided to give Natalie the wedding she deserves. After all, she only gets married once. We hope. That wasn't an answer, but it was answer enough. What about a small loan? Even 5 or 10,000 would help us, Mira, you're 30 years old. You need to figure these things out yourself. Your father and I can't be expected to bail you out every time life gets difficult. That's part of being an adult. Every time. As if they'd ever helped me with anything. As if I'd ever asked for anything before this moment. This isn't life getting difficult, Mom. This is your grandson potentially dying. He's not going to die. You're being hysterical. Look, I have to go. I'm meeting Natalie and a wedding planner in 20 minutes. We'll talk later. She hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, listening to Oliver's breathing, too fast, too labored, the sound of a heart that was failing, and something inside me cracked. Marcus's parents loaned us $12,000. My Aunt Sophie, my father's sister who'd always been kind to me, sent $3,000. Rachel and her wife set up a crowdfunding campaign that raised $7,000 from friends, colleagues, and strangers who cared more about my son than his own grandparents did. We took out loans for the rest. Loans with interest rates that would follow us for decades. Oliver had his first surgery when he was 3 months old. 7 hours on the operating table while Marcus and I sat in the waiting room, holding each other and praying to gods we weren't sure we believed in. Dr. Lin emerged at 6 in the evening, exhausted but smiling. He did great. He's in recovery. You can see him in about an hour. I've never felt relief like that in my life. It was physical, a weight lifting off my chest, allowing me to breathe for the first time in months. My parents didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't visit. 3 days after Oliver's surgery, my mother called to ask if I'd be available for a fitting for Natalie's wedding. I was to be a bridesmaid, apparently, though no one had actually asked me if I wanted to be. The dresses are being custom made, my mother said. We need your measurements. I was sitting in Oliver's hospital room, watching monitors, changing his bandages, administering medication through his 4. My son had a 12-inch scar down his chest. He was 3 months old. I can't think about a bridesmaid dress right now, Mom. The wedding is in 8 months, Mira. We need to order soon. My son just had open heart surgery 3 days ago. And Dr. Lin said he's recovering well, didn't she? Life goes on, honey. Natalie wants you in her wedding party. It would mean a lot to her. It would mean a lot to her. Not we want you there. Not you're important to us. Just that it would mean something to Natalie, the sister who hadn't acknowledged Oliver's existence, who hadn't called or visited or sent so much as a card. How much is the dress? I asked, my voice flat. Only $600. Such a steal for custom work. $600. More than a week's worth of Oliver's medications. I can't afford that right now. Oh, Mira. My mother's voice dripped with disappointment. Don't be difficult about this. It's just a dress. Just a dress. Just $600. Just my sister's wedding. Just forget that your son nearly died and focus on what really matters, appearances. I have to go, I said. The nurse is here. I hung up before she could respond. Oliver came home after 10 days in the hospital. He was healing well, but he'd need constant monitoring, regular cardiology appointments, and he'd need at least 2 more surgeries as he grew, one around age 2, another around age 4 or 5. We were $43,000 in debt and counting. I went back to my residency when Oliver was 4 months old because we needed my income, needed my health insurance, needed the promise of my attending salary once I finished training. Marcus's mother came to stay with us to help with childcare because we couldn't afford a nanny. She was an angel, patient and loving, and everything my own mother wasn't. Through it all, the preparations for Natalie's wedding continued like an unstoppable force of nature. Every family phone call revolved around it. Venues and caterers and florists and bands. Destination bachelorette party in Napa Valley. Destination wedding in Tuscany, Italy. The wedding was going to cost $340,000. I learned this when my mother casually mentioned it during a rare visit to our apartment when Oliver was 6 months old. She'd stopped by for 30 minutes, spent most of it on her phone with the wedding planner, and mentioned the budget like it was nothing. $340,000? I repeated, my voice hollow. It sounds like a lot, but when you break it down by category, it's really quite reasonable for a destination wedding of this caliber, my mother said, not looking up from her phone. The venue alone is $85,000, but it's a 15th century villa, Mira. 15th century. The photos will be incredible. I was holding Oliver, who'd just woken from a nap. He smiled at me. He'd started smiling recently, these beautiful gummy grins that made everything worthwhile. I looked at his smile, at the scar on his chest visible above his onesie, and then at my mother, who was texting about chair covers. You could have saved his life, I said softly. What? My mother finally looked up. $340,000. You're spending nearly 8 times what we needed on a party. You could have saved Oliver's life, and you chose chair covers instead. My mother's face hardened. That's not fair, Mira. Natalie's wedding has nothing to do with Oliver's medical issues. Your father and I are allowed to spend our money how we choose. You're right, I said. You are. And I'm allowed to remember that choice. You're being very ungrateful. We've helped you plenty over the years. I stared at her. Name one time. We paid for your college. You paid for 2 years, then said I needed to learn responsibility and take out loans for the rest. Meanwhile, you paid for all 4 years of Natalie's private art school. Well, Natalie needed more support. You were always so independent. Independent. The word people use when they mean neglected but want to make it sound like a choice. You should leave, I said quietly. Mira, please leave. Oliver needs to eat, and I need to not look at you right now. She left in a huff, and I sat down and cried while Oliver nursed, his small hand resting on my chest, right over my heart. Marcus found me like that an hour later. He held us both and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. We both knew the truth now. My parents had made their choice, and it wasn't us. The wedding invitation arrived 2 months later. Heavy cardstock, gold embossing, tissue paper inserts, a separate RSVP card with a stamp. The invitation suite alone probably cost $50 per guest. There were 200 guests invited. That's $10,000. On invitations. On paper that people would glance at and throw away. I held that invitation in my hands and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not quite anger. Not quite grief. Something more like clarity. Understanding. The death of hope. I RSVP'd that we'd attend. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew that not going would cause more drama than going. And I was too tired for drama. All my energy was focused on Oliver, on my residency, on surviving. The bachelorette party happened when Oliver was 9 months old. My mother called to tell me all about it: a weekend in Napa Valley, wine tastings, spa treatments, a private chef, 12 of Natalie's closest friends. All expenses paid by my parents, naturally. It was magical, my mother gushed. Natalie was so happy. You should have seen her face during the champagne toast. It was worth every penny. How much did it cost? I asked, already knowing I didn't want to hear the answer. Oh, I don't know exactly. 25,000? Maybe 30? Your father handled it. $30,000. On a weekend. More than half of what could have saved Oliver, spent on champagne and massages. I made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Are you all right? My mother asked, sounding mildly concerned. I'm fine, I lied. I have to go. Oliver's crying. He wasn't crying. He was playing happily on his mat, batting at toys. But I needed off that call before I said something I couldn't take back. Not yet. Not until the time was right. Because by then, I'd started planning. Started documenting. Started preparing for the moment when I'd make them understand what they'd done. I just didn't know how yet. Oliver was a year old when Natalie's wedding took place. The entire family flew to Tuscany: aunts, uncles, cousins, my grandmother. Everyone except me, Marcus, and Oliver. We couldn't afford the trip. The flights alone would have been $4,000 for the 3 of us, and we'd have needed a hotel because while my parents were putting up the wedding party in a luxury villa, they hadn't offered to include us. Plus, Oliver had a cardiology appointment scheduled for the week after the wedding, and we couldn't risk missing it. I told my parents we couldn't come 3 months before the wedding. My mother's response was devastation, not because she'd miss us, but because it would look bad if the bride's sister wasn't there. What will people think? She wailed over the phone. Maybe they'll think your grandson's health is more important than appearances, I suggested. You're being spiteful. You're trying to ruin Natalie's day. I was too tired to argue. Think whatever you want, Mom. The wedding happened without us. My phone blew up with photos in the family group chat: the villa, the flowers, Natalie's dress, the ceremony at sunset, the reception with string quartet and 5-course meal. Everyone looked so happy. So beautiful. So completely unconcerned with the fact that a year earlier, Oliver had been dying while they planned this party. One photo showed my parents dancing, both of them laughing. The caption from my cousin: best wedding ever. Robert and Linda know how to throw a party. Best wedding ever. $340,000 well spent. I turned off my phone and played with Oliver, who'd started pulling himself up to standing. He was hitting all his milestones now, developing normally despite everything. He was strong. A fighter. He got that from Marcus and me, not from the grandparents who'd abandoned him. After the wedding, I withdrew even further from my family. I stopped calling. Stopped accepting their dinner invitations. When they called me, I kept conversations brief and superficial. They didn't seem to notice or care. They had Natalie, after all, and she was all they needed. I finished my residency and joined a pediatric cardiology practice. The attending salary was a revelation, $275,000 a year, plus benefits. For the first time since Oliver's diagnosis, we could breathe. We started aggressively paying down the medical debt and the loans. But more importantly, I started saving. Every extra dollar went into a separate account. I didn't know what I was saving for yet, but I knew I'd need resources when the time came. Power requires capital. Oliver had his second surgery when he was 2 years old. It went perfectly. Dr. Lin said he was doing phenomenally well, that his prognosis was excellent. He'd need one more surgery around age 4 or 5, but after that, he'd likely be free and clear. My parents sent a card. They didn't visit. They were too busy helping Natalie and Brandon with their new house. They'd given them $150,000 for a down payment. I added that to my documentation. The spreadsheet I'd been keeping since Oliver's diagnosis, tracking every dollar they'd spent on Natalie, every request they'd denied for Oliver, every choice they'd made that valued appearances over substance. The spreadsheet was very long. Oliver thrived. He was bright and funny and kind. He loved dinosaurs and trucks and reading books. He had no memory of his surgeries, no awareness of the battle we'd fought to keep him alive. That was how it should be. Children should be allowed to just be children. When Oliver was 3, I got pregnant again. It was unexpected, we'd been using protection, but life finds a way. This time, the pregnancy was smooth. Our daughter, Lily, was born healthy and perfect, no heart defects. I cried with relief when the pediatrician confirmed she was fine. My parents visited the hospital for 15 minutes. My mother spent most of it on her phone. They didn't hold Lily, didn't ask about Oliver, and left quickly because they had tickets to a show. Natalie didn't come at all. She was too busy with work. I didn't care anymore. Their presence or absence had stopped mattering. They'd become irrelevant to me, just people I happened to share DNA with, nothing more. I focused on my children, my husband, my career. I built a beautiful life without them. I made attending at one of the top pediatric hospitals in the country. I published research papers. I spoke at conferences. I saved children's lives daily, giving other parents what mine had refused to give me: hope, support, a fighting chance. And I waited. The opportunity came when Oliver was 4 years old. Dr. Patricia Lin called me into her office one afternoon. "Mira, I want to talk to you about something. The hospital is launching a capital campaign to build a new pediatric cardiac center. State-of-the-art facility, surgical suites, research labs, the whole thing. The board is looking for a namesake donor, someone willing to contribute significantly in exchange for naming rights." My heart started beating faster. How significant? $10 million. I kept my face neutral even though my mind was racing. That's substantial. It is. But the facility will change pediatric cardiac care in the Pacific Northwest. We'll be able to treat kids who currently have to go to Stanford or CHOP. We'll save lives, Mira. Hundreds of them. I thought about Oliver. About all the children like him. About parents sitting in waiting rooms, terrified and helpless, begging anyone who'd listen for help. What if the donor wanted to name it after someone specific? I asked carefully. As a memorial. Patricia's expression softened. She knew Oliver's story. Everyone at the hospital did. That would be beautiful. The board would absolutely agree to that. I smiled. Let me make some calls. The account I'd been building for 4 years had $3.2 million in it, savings, investments, bonuses, and the profits from some smart real estate purchases Marcus and I had made. It wasn't enough. But I had other assets. My practice partnership had equity value. We owned our home in a booming Seattle market. And I had no qualms about liquidating everything if it meant making this happen. I called my financial advisor and told him what I wanted to do. He tried to talk me out of it. That's your entire net worth, Dr. Chen. Your retirement. Your children's college funds. Everything. But I was firm. Do it, I said. All of it. Whatever it takes to get to 10 million. May I ask why? I thought about my parents dancing at Natalie's $340,000 wedding while Oliver fought for his life. I thought about every no I'd heard, every request dismissed, every time I'd been told to handle it myself. Because some things are worth more than money, I said. It took 3 months to liquidate everything and secure the full 10 million. Marcus supported me completely, even though it meant we were essentially starting over financially. But we were both doctors with good incomes. We'd rebuild. We always did. What mattered was the statement I was about to make. The hospital announced the donation and the new facility at a press conference. The Oliver Chen Memorial Center for Pediatric Cardiology, made possible by a transformational gift from Dr. Mira Chen, will be the premier pediatric cardiac center in the Pacific Northwest. The press conference was covered by local news. My name and face were everywhere. My parents' friends started calling them, "Did you see? Your daughter donated $10 million. My mother called me that evening. Mira, we saw the news. We had no idea you had that kind of money. Why would you? You never asked about my life. $10 million, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. That's extraordinary. We're so proud of you. Proud. Now. Not when I graduated medical school. Not when I became an attending. Not when I saved my son's life through sheer force of will. Now, when there was money involved, when it made them look good by association. Are you calling for a reason? I asked coldly. Well, we were hoping you'd included us in the press release. As Oliver's grandparents. It would have been nice to be acknowledged. I laughed. Actually laughed. You want to be acknowledged as his grandparents? The grandparents who refused to help save his life. Who spent nearly 8 times what he needed on Natalie's wedding? Those grandparents? Silence. The dedication ceremony is in 6 months, I continued. You're invited. Both of you, and Natalie and Brandon too. I want you there. Of course we'll come, my father's voice joined the call. He'd been listening on speaker. We wouldn't miss it. Good, I said. There's something I need to say, and I want you to hear it in person. I hung up before they could respond. The next 6 months were a beautiful torture of anticipation. The facility was built on schedule, a gorgeous modern building with floor-to-ceiling windows and the latest technology. The surgical suites were works of art. The family waiting areas were designed to be comforting rather than institutional. Everything about it was perfect. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in September. The hospital invited major donors, medical staff, board members, and press. Lots of press. This was the largest single donation in the hospital's history, and they wanted to celebrate it properly. I made sure my parents, Natalie, and Brandon received special invitations. VIP seating in the front row. They wouldn't be able to miss a word. The day arrived clear and warm. Marcus, Oliver, now 4.5 and so proud of his special building, and baby Lily, now 18 months, arrived early. Rachel and her wife were there. Marcus's parents, who'd been more family to me than my own, were there. Aunt Sophie was there, tears already in her eyes. My parents arrived 30 minutes before the ceremony, dressed to the nines. Designer everything. They looked prosperous and important, exactly the image they'd cultivated their entire lives. Natalie and Brandon looked equally polished. They approached me with big smiles, as if we were a close, loving family. "Mira, darling," my mother air-kissed my cheek. "This is so exciting. We've been telling everyone about your generous donation." Of course they had. Basking in reflected glory. "I'm glad you could make it," I said neutrally. We made small talk, them gushing about the building, me giving short responses, until it was time to begin. They took their seats in the front row, right where I wanted them. I stood backstage with the hospital president, my heart hammering but my resolve absolute. The president gave his speech. Dr. Lin gave hers. Both talked about the importance of pediatric cardiac care, the lives that would be saved, the research that would be conducted. Then the president introduced me. "And now, I'd like to invite Dr. Mira Chen to say a few words about why she chose to make this extraordinary gift." I walked to the podium. Behind me, they unveiled the sign, the Oliver Chen Memorial Center for Pediatric Cardiology. My parents beamed, probably imagining I was about to give a touching speech about family support and love. Instead, I told the truth. "Thank you all for being here. Before I talk about why this building exists, I need to tell you about the child it's named after. My son, Oliver." I clicked a remote, and the screen behind me filled with a photo of Oliver as an infant, tiny and fragile in the NICU after his first surgery. Oliver was born with a complex congenital heart defect. Without surgery, he would have died in infancy. With surgery, he had an excellent chance of survival. The problem was that surgery was expensive. Even with good insurance, we faced between $45,000 and $60,000 in out-of-pocket costs over several years. I paused, letting that number sink in. I was a resident at the time, making about $58,000 a year. My husband was an early career attending. We had some savings, but not enough. So I did what most people would do when facing a crisis. I asked my family for help. Another click. The screen now showed a photo of my parents' house, their large, beautiful, expensive house. My parents are wealthy. Very wealthy. My father is a successful real estate developer. They live comfortably, travel extensively, and have always been generous with their money, with one of their daughters. I clicked again. Photos of Natalie's engagement party, clearly expensive and elaborate. "This is my younger sister Natalie's engagement party. It cost $47,000. More than the entire amount we needed to save Oliver's life." When I asked my parents for help with Oliver's medical costs, they said no. They said they had commitments. They said I needed to figure it out myself. My mother's face had gone white. My father sat rigid, his jaw clenched. Their commitment was this. Click. Photos from Natalie's wedding. The villa, the flowers, the reception. Natalie's wedding cost $340,000. That's nearly 8 times what could have saved their grandson's life. The wedding happened when Oliver was a year old, just months after his first open-heart surgery. A surgery they didn't attend. A surgery they didn't help pay for. A surgery they acted as if was an inconvenience to their wedding planning. The audience was completely silent. I could see people shifting uncomfortably, glancing at my parents in the front row. Let me be very clear about the choices that were made. My parents spent $30,000 on a bachelorette party weekend in Napa Valley while Oliver was 9 months old and we were drowning in medical debt. They spent $85,000 on a wedding venue, a single location for a single day, which is nearly twice what we begged them for to save their grandson's life. They spent $15,000 on flowers that were thrown away the next day. I clicked through more photos, each one with a price tag. Dress, $12,000. Catering, $55,000. Photography, $18,000. Entertainment, $25,000. Every single one of these expenses was deemed more important than their grandson's survival. My mother stood up. "Mira, stop this right now, sit down," I said, my voice cold enough to freeze. "You demanded to be acknowledged as Oliver's grandparents. Fine. Let everyone see what kind of grandparents you are." She sat, her face crumbling. "My husband and I went into massive debt to save our son. We took out loans we're still paying off. We sold everything we could. We accepted help from friends, from colleagues, from strangers on the internet who cared more about a child they'd never met than his own grandparents did. My mother-in-law, who has a fraction of my parents' wealth, gave us everything she could and moved in to help with childcare so we could keep working." Click. A photo of Oliver now, healthy and smiling. This is Oliver today. He's 4.5 years old. He's thriving. He loves dinosaurs and reading and his little sister. He's alive because his father and I refused to give up on him, even when his grandparents did. I turned to look directly at my parents. After the wedding, my parents gave Natalie and Brandon $150,000 as a down payment on a house. They've continued to fund her life lavishly. Meanwhile, they've never once offered to help repay the debts we incurred saving Oliver. Not once. Back to the audience. This building exists because I will never let another family go through what we went through. Because every child deserves to be fought for. Because no parent should have to choose between their child's life and financial ruin while their wealthy family throws parties that cost more than life-saving treatment. My voice broke slightly, but I pushed through. This building is named after Oliver not just to honor him, but to honor every child whose family failed them. Every kid whose life was deemed less valuable than appearances, than social status, than keeping up with the Joneses. This building is a statement: children's lives have infinite value, and anyone who doesn't understand that shouldn't be allowed to call themselves family. The audience erupted in applause. Standing ovation. People were crying. My parents sat frozen, exposed, destroyed. Natalie was crying, her face in her hands. Brandon was trying to get them to leave, but my father was too proud to run. I stepped away from the podium. Dr. Lin hugged me tightly. The hospital president shook my hand, his eyes wet. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," he whispered. Marcus was there with Oliver and Lily. Oliver hugged my legs. "Mommy, everyone's clapping for you." "They're clapping for you, buddy. Because you're a fighter." The reception after was full of people congratulating me, thanking me, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and financial crisis. But I was watching my parents. They stood alone in a corner, isolated. People were avoiding them, whispering. The looks they received were full of judgment and disgust. They'd been exposed, and everyone knew what they'd done. After 30 minutes, they tried to leave. I intercepted them at the door. "Leaving so soon?" I asked pleasantly. My father's face was red with rage. "How dare you humiliate us like that? In public. In front of everyone. How dare I tell the truth? Or how dare I hold you accountable? We're your parents," my mother said, mascara running down her face. "You owed us respect." "I owed you nothing. You're the parents, you owed me love. You owed Oliver basic human decency. You failed. I'm simply making sure everyone knows it." "We made mistakes," my father said through gritted teeth. "But publicly destroying us, destroying you? You're fine. You're wealthy, comfortable, secure. Your life will continue exactly as it has. The only thing I've destroyed is your reputation. And reputation should reflect reality, don't you think?" Natalie appeared, her eyes red. You're a horrible person, Mira. Vindictive and cruel. You've always been jealous of me, and now you're using your money to get revenge. I looked at my sister, this woman I'd once loved, once protected, once hoped would grow into someone decent. Jealous? Natalie, I have nothing to be jealous of. I have a career I built myself. I have children I'd die for. I have a husband who's my partner in every sense. I have self-respect and clear conscience. What do you have? A wedding that cost more than some people's houses and the knowledge that your parents valued your party over your nephew's life. Enjoy that. I walked away, back to my real family. The family I'd chosen and who'd chosen me back. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The local news picked up the story. Prominent Seattle doctor exposes parents' betrayal in emotional speech. The video of my speech went viral. Millions of views. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of toxic families and chosen family. My parents' social circle imploded. Friends stopped calling. The charity boards my mother sat on quietly asked her to step down. My father's business associates began distancing themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with the couple who'd chosen a party over their grandson's life. Natalie and Brandon's Christmas cards stopped coming. They moved to Portland 6 months later, trying to escape the scandal. Their marriage fell apart a year after that. Apparently, when you build a life on a foundation of entitlement and parental money, it crumbles when that foundation is exposed as rotten. My parents tried calling. Dozens of times. I never answered. They sent letters, long, rambling attempts at justification mixed with requests for forgiveness. I kept the letters but didn't respond. What was there to say? They'd made their choice 4 years earlier. I'd simply made mine. They showed up at my house once. Marcus answered the door and told them to leave or he'd call the police. They left. A year after the dedication, my mother's sister, Aunt Sophie, called me. Mira, honey, I need you to know your parents are not doing well. Your father's business is struggling. Your mother's on antidepressants. They're essentially pariahs in their social circles. And? I said, not unkindly but not sympathetically either. Don't you feel any guilt about that? No. Do they feel guilt about letting Oliver nearly die? About the years of debt they forced us into? About the fact that we'll be paying off loans until Oliver's in middle school? Silence. Then, they say they made a mistake. They made a choice, Aunt Sophie. Repeatedly. The engagement party, the bachelorette party, the wedding, the house down payment, those weren't mistakes. Those were deliberate decisions that told me exactly where their priorities were. But their family. No, their relatives. Family shows up. Family sacrifices. Family doesn't let babies die while they plan parties. What they are is a cautionary tale. That's harsh, Mira. Yes, it is. But you know what's harsher? Watching your 3-month-old go through open-heart surgery alone because his grandparents were too busy sampling wedding cakes. That's harsh. I'm just honest. Aunt Sophie sighed. I hope someday you can forgive them. I don't need to forgive them. I need to protect my children from people who believe love is conditional and that some grandchildren are more valuable than others. Oliver and Lily will grow up knowing they're cherished for exactly who they are, not for how they make someone look. That's what matters. Oliver is 7 now, thriving and healthy. He had his 3rd surgery when he was 5, the final one, and his prognosis is excellent. He'll need monitoring throughout his life, but he's essentially been given a normal life expectancy. He wants to be a doctor when he grows up, like Mommy, and I've never been prouder of anything. Lily is 4, brilliant and fierce. She idolizes her big brother and doesn't understand why she doesn't have grandparents on Mommy's side. I've told her that sometimes families are complicated, that some people aren't capable of being the grandparents children deserve. She accepts this with the easy wisdom of childhood. Marcus and I rebuilt our finances. It took time, we're still paying off the medical debt, but we're comfortable. More importantly, we're happy. We have family dinners with Marcus's parents and Rachel and her family. We have birthday parties and holidays full of love and laughter. We have everything that matters. The Oliver Chin Memorial Center for Pediatric Cardiology treats hundreds of children every year. The research conducted there has led to breakthrough treatments. I visit regularly, and every time I see a family in the waiting room, anxious, terrified, praying, I make sure to talk to them. To let them know they're not alone. To connect them with resources. To be the support my family never was. Some people think what I did was cruel. That exposing my parents publicly was vindictive. That family secrets should stay secret. Those people have never watched their baby fight for every breath while their family argued about flower arrangements. Here's what I've learned: forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. And blood doesn't make family, behavior does. My parents taught me exactly what kind of people they were through their choices. They taught me that appearances mattered more than substance, that one child's needs were less important than another's wants, that love was something you earned rather than something you received freely. I simply reflected their lessons back to them on a scale they couldn't ignore. The building stands as a permanent reminder, to them, to everyone, that children's lives are invaluable. That no party, no wedding, no social status is worth a child's survival. That some choices can never be undone, and some betrayals can never be forgiven. My parents made their choice. I made mine. And I sleep peacefully at night knowing I chose my children over everything else, exactly as parents should. Exactly as mine didn't. That's not revenge. That's justice. That's accountability. That's ensuring that the next generation learns a better lesson than I did, that you are worthy of love simply for existing, not for what you achieve or how you make others look. Oliver and Lily will never doubt that they're loved. They'll never wonder if they're less important than appearances. They'll never feel invisible. And they'll grow up knowing that sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even when, especially when, those people are family. Because family is supposed to be your safe place. And when it's not, you have the right, the obligation even, to build a new one. A better one. One based on choice and commitment rather than obligation and genetics. I chose Marcus. I chose my children. I chose Rachel and Marcus's parents and Aunt Sophie and everyone who showed up when it mattered. And I chose to expose the people who failed us, not out of cruelty, but out of a bone-deep need for truth. For accountability. For the record to reflect reality. My parents spent $340,000 on a party while their grandson nearly died. That's the truth. And now everyone knows it. And that building, that beautiful, life-saving building, stands as proof that one person who genuinely cares can do more good than an entire family who only pretends to. $10 million to save children's lives. Versus $340,000 for a party. The math tells the story better than I ever could. And every time my parents drive past that building, which they do, because it's on the main route through the medical district, they see Oliver's name. They see the choice they made. They see what they valued more than him. I hope it haunts them. I hope every time they see that building, they remember the moment they said no. The moment they chose flowers and cake and appearances over their grandson's life. I hope it hurts. Because pain is sometimes the only teacher that works. And maybe, just maybe, the next family in their situation will see that building and my story and make a different choice. Maybe the next grandparents will choose the child over the party. Maybe the next parents will break the cycle of conditional love and favoritism. Maybe the next generation will be better. That's why I gave that speech. That's why I donated everything I had. Not for revenge, though I won't lie and say the justice of it doesn't satisfy something deep in my soul. But for change. For visibility. For every child who's ever been told they're not worth the investment. You are worth it. Every child is worth it. And any family who doesn't understand that doesn't deserve to call themselves family. I learned that the hard way. But I learned it. And now, maybe, others won't have to. The building stands. Oliver thrives. We move forward. And my parents live with their choice. That's how this story ends, not with reconciliation or forgiveness, but with boundaries and truth and the fierce protection of the children who depend on us. Because that's what real love looks like. And I'm so grateful I learned it, even if I had to learn it from their absence rather than their presence.